My name is Cassandra Blake. I'm 32 years old, and what my family doesn't know is that I'm the CEO of a billion-dollar tech company. They think I'm struggling, perhaps a little lost because I don't show up to dinners wearing designer labels or drive luxury cars like my sister does. They assume that because I don't talk about my job, I must not be successful. Tonight is my father's 60th birthday, a lavish party at an exclusive country club where appearances matter more than truth, more than character, more than love. I've chosen to dress simply: dark jeans, a clean white blouse, no flashy jewelry. This is my final test, the last chance for them to look beyond the surface and see me for who I really am. But before I tell you what happened that night, let me take you back. I was born in a quiet suburb of Minneapolis, Minnesota, in a modest 3-bedroom house. My father, Charles Blake, worked tirelessly running a small manufacturing business. My mother, Lillian, was a homemaker who stretched every dollar and made sure our little family of 4 had warm meals and laughter at the table. Back then, my father valued integrity, and Sunday dinners were sacred. We didn't have much, but I never felt we lacked anything that truly mattered. Everything changed when I was 15. My father's company landed a government contract, and overnight our lives transformed. We moved into a sprawling house in a gated neighborhood. My father traded his beat-up pickup for a sleek BMW, and suddenly the Blake family was somebody. The shift wasn't just in our bank account, it was in our values. Sunday dinners turned into catered affairs, vacations turned into photo ops, and my sister Bianca, 2 years older than me, adapted faster than anyone. She dropped her old friends, reinvented her wardrobe, and made it her mission to climb every social ladder available. She loved saying, "It's not just about having money, it's about showing it." My mother, always polite and composed, reinforced this new system. She encouraged Bianca's every performance, praised her designer outfits, and gently urged me to present myself better whenever I showed up in jeans or without makeup. The unspoken message was clear. Success was about how others saw you. Image mattered more than effort. And if you weren't wearing the right watch or carrying the right bag, your opinion didn't count. I began to feel like a stranger in my own family. The warm, grounding values I grew up with had been buried under a mountain of status symbols. When I left for college at 18, I didn't just move out, I escaped. My parents wanted me to attend a top-tier Ivy League school. Instead, I chose a state university known for its computer science program. My father was disappointed. "You're wasting your potential," he said. What he didn't understand was that I wasn't chasing prestige, I was chasing purpose. College was tough. I juggled classes, coding projects, and 2 part-time jobs. I lived off vending machine dinners and pulled more all-nighters in the computer lab than I care to admit. While Bianca traveled to Italy for study abroad, I was building the first prototype of a software that would later change my life. Code made sense to me. It was logical, fair, and didn't care how you looked or where you came from. In my junior year, I developed a neural interface algorithm that caught the attention of one of my professors. With his encouragement, I entered it into a national tech innovation competition. I won. The prize money wasn't huge, but it was enough to seed what would later become Synapse Core Technologies. I founded the company from my 1-bedroom apartment, working nights and weekends while finishing school. There was no glamour, just drive. Ramen noodles, second-hand furniture, and the hum of servers running from a converted closet. My family never knew. They assumed I was struggling because I wore the same jacket every time I came home. After graduation, I scaled quietly. Investors were drawn not by flash, but by substance. Our technology was breaking barriers in human-computer interaction. Within 5 years, we had over 200 employees and a valuation north of $1.8 billion, and yet I kept my success private from my family. At first, it was because I wanted to focus. Later, it became something else a question. Would they ever value me without the gloss, without the labels? Their behavior during family dinners made the answer painfully clear. My father would sigh dramatically at my 10-year-old car. "Still driving that old thing?" My mother would suggest I borrow something nicer from Bianca. And Bianca? She'd lean across the table, eyes sparkling with condescension. "Cassandra, you know there's nothing wrong with wanting to look successful. Maybe then you'd find a man." I smiled. I nodded. And I stayed silent until tonight. Tonight, my father's milestone birthday brings together every powerful name he can muster: CEOs, city officials, socialites. The invitation arrived on gold-embossed paper. Dress code, formal. Bianca texted separately. "Please wear something that won't embarrass Dad." I read it while sitting in the corner office of Synapse Corps' downtown San Francisco headquarters, with a view that stretched to the Golden Gate. I knew then I would go. But I wouldn't dress up. I wouldn't rent a limo. I wouldn't wear labels. I would walk in as myself, just myself. Because if they still couldn't see me, truly see me, then maybe they never would. And I was finally ready to be okay with that. The morning of my father's birthday dawned cool and bright. I stood on the balcony of my apartment, sipping black coffee, while the city of San Francisco came to life below me. The skyline stretched wide, indifferent to status or legacy. Traffic hummed steadily on the freeway. Somewhere out there, guests were already getting ready for the party of the year, selecting their tailored tuxedos and gowns, practicing small talk that would be traded like currency among the elite. I wasn't nervous, but I felt an unmistakable tightness in my chest, anticipation mingled with resignation. Tonight, I wasn't just attending a party. I was walking into a silent war of values. I dressed with intention. No brand labels, no glittering accessories, a clean white blouse, a tailored navy blazer, dark jeans, and the pearl earrings my grandmother left me small, beautiful, and honest. My hair, loosely tied back, my makeup minimal. My car, a well-maintained silver sedan, waited in the garage. As I drove toward the venue, a sleek country club perched high on the hilltops of Marin, I rehearsed what I might say if the moment came. Would I reveal everything, or would I wait and observe one last time? The parking lot was filled with luxury cars. Valets in white gloves opened doors, ushered in guests, smiled with trained politeness. When I pulled up, one of them hesitated a fraction of a second longer than usual, eyes scanning my vehicle. Then he masked it quickly, offering a smile that did not reach his eyes. I handed him the keys and walked toward the entrance, shoulders back, my breath steady. The entrance was draped in soft lighting and floral arrangements that screamed opulence. The marble foyer beyond sparkled under a massive chandelier. Guests in gowns and sharp suits moved like choreographed dancers. Champagne was offered at the door. I declined. I didn't want anything clouding my senses tonight. I spotted Bianca first. She was standing near the coat check, laughing with two women I vaguely recognized from past functions. She wore a backless green satin dress, her blonde curls perfectly arranged, diamonds cascading from her ears. She turned, caught sight of me, and froze. Bianca approached, her smile quickly fading. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe and stopped at my shoes. "Cassandra," she said, forcing a tight smile. "Is that what you're wearing?" Her tone was dipped in sugar, but her words were knives. "I am," I replied simply. "It's good to see you." She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "This is Dad's 60th. Everyone is here. This isn't casual Friday at a startup." I met her eyes, unblinking. "I'm not here to impress anyone with a dress, Bianca." She blinked, clearly unsure how to respond. "Dad's been stressing about tonight for weeks," she said finally. "Try not to make it about you." I didn't reply. Instead, I walked past her and into the main ballroom. The ceilings were impossibly high, draped with velvet. A string quartet played near a fountain carved from ice. I recognized faces from business magazines, local politics, society pages. Conversations buzzed around business deals, stock options, luxury travel. My mother spotted me and came over. She was wearing a silver gown and a necklace that sparkled like stars. "Cassandra," she said, sounding equal parts surprised and cautious. "You're here early." She kissed my cheek delicately. Her eyes traveled down my outfit with the same quiet critique I had grown used to. "You're not changing?" "I didn't bring anything else," I replied. Her lips twitched, but she said nothing. Instead, she looped her arm through mine and guided me toward a group of women near the buffet. "Let's at least put you in the best light," she whispered. The next hour passed in a blur of small talk and strategic glances. Every conversation felt like a performance. My mother introduced me as working in tech, with the same vagueness she always employed, as though the truth might stain her image. I answered questions politely, asked a few of my own, and accepted compliments with the same quiet detachment I had perfected over years of being underestimated. It wasn't until I was standing by the bar that it happened. A man in his 60s approached me, his tailored suit impeccable, his face familiar. "You're Cassandra Blake," he said, extending a hand. "We haven't met officially. I'm Philip Greer. I sit on the board of Cascade Capital." I shook his hand, and for a moment I thought it would be a simple exchange. Then he added, "I've heard quite a bit about Synapse Core Technologies lately. Impressive work, brilliant leadership." Several people nearby turned to listen. Before I could respond, my father appeared behind me. "Philip," he said warmly, clapping him on the back, "glad you could make it." He turned to me, his expression briefly unreadable. "I see you've met my daughter." Philip smiled. "Indeed. She's running quite the operation over there. You must be proud." My father's face stiffened. "Operation?" he said slowly. Philip looked confused. "Synapse Core. She's doing remarkable work. I was just telling her." There was a beat of silence. Then my father laughed. "I think you're mistaken. Cassandra is well. She works with computers, but she's not in charge of anything like that." Philip raised an eyebrow. "You're not the Cassandra Blake who founded Synapse Core Technologies?" I looked at my father and then back at Philip. "I am," I said clearly. The silence that followed was like glass shattering. My father stared at me, his mouth slightly open. My mother, who had returned with a plate of hors d'oeuvres, stopped in her tracks. Bianca, who was standing a few feet away, let out a tiny gasp. Around us, several guests had fallen silent, eyes flicking between me and the man who had just dismissed me in front of half the room. "You?" my father finally said. "That can't be right. Synapse Core is worth 1.8 billion, I finished for him. And, yes, I built it. From scratch. His face drained of color. You never said anything. You never asked. I turned and walked away, leaving a silence behind me that would ring in their ears long after the music resumed. Outside, the night air was crisp. I walked down the long path that curved through the country club gardens, past trimmed hedges and glowing lanterns. My heart was pounding, but my steps were steady. Behind me, I heard someone call my name. It was Bianca. "Cassandra," she said, catching up. "You could have told us. You should have told us." I turned to face her. Would it have mattered? She didn't answer. We stood in silence for a moment. Then she asked, "Why did you hide it?" I looked up at the stars. "Because I wanted to know if you could love me when I wasn't a trophy." She flinched just slightly. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" She swallowed. "You've changed." "No," I said softly. "I've just stopped pretending." The door behind us opened, and my father stepped out. He looked older than he had hours ago, like the weight of realization had landed hard. He walked toward me slowly. "I didn't know," he said. "I know," I replied. He looked down at his shoes, then back at me. "I'm sorry." The words were small, uncertain, but they were real. I nodded. "Thank you." Then I turned and walked toward my car, the night cool against my skin. Behind me, the party continued, glittering and shallow, but for the first time in years I felt weightless, no longer burdened by the need to prove anything. I had already won. The sun had long set by the time I returned home, but the lights of the city still pulsed like a heartbeat outside my penthouse windows. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, sipping a glass of water, watching the skyline flicker in the distance. Everything was the same, and yet nothing was. Tonight, the truth had broken the surface after years buried beneath layers of silence and performance. My family knew now. The game was over. I replayed the scene in the ballroom in my mind, the moment of disbelief on my father's face, the collective pause of the crowd, the way my mother's tray of hors d'oeuvres trembled slightly in her hand. I had expected shock. I had even prepared for anger. What I hadn't anticipated was the grief, the kind that rises in your throat when you realize something has been lost for good. I sat at the kitchen island, opened my laptop, and checked in on the overnight performance reports from Synapse Corps' European servers. The rhythm of numbers grounded me. Data didn't care about appearances. Algorithms did not judge. They worked or they didn't, and tonight they worked beautifully. But no metric could measure the ache in my chest. Not disappointment exactly, something deeper, like mourning a version of myself who had spent too long waiting for approval that was never coming. The next morning, I woke early. Habit. I dressed in my usual uniform, black jeans, a soft gray blouse, and the same low-profile sneakers I always wore on development days. The elevator hummed quietly as I descended to the garage. My car, faithful and unremarkable, waited as always. I drove toward the Synapse Corps headquarters, a sleek building with glass that caught the morning sun just right, like a mirror angled toward the future. Stephanie was already in the executive conference room when I arrived. She was pacing, coffee in hand, phone wedged between her shoulder and ear. "Yes, tell the Tokyo team we're pushing the release by 48 hours. No, I'll handle the client call myself," she said, then spotted me. She mouthed the words, "You okay?" I nodded and set my bag down. Stephanie ended the call and exhaled sharply. "So, you did it." "I didn't plan to," I admitted. "It just happened." "And how did it go?" I gave her a look. That bad? She asked. Let's say enlightening. She handed me a folder. Well, while you were exposing decades of buried family drama, we got the go-ahead from the UK partner. They want a full integration timeline by Monday. Good, I said. Let's keep moving. We dove into work, and for a few hours I was exactly where I belonged. In control, respected, seen for my ideas, not my wardrobe, but reality intruded again by mid-afternoon in the form of a text from my father. Can we talk today? Just you and me. I stared at the message for several minutes. The urge to ignore it was strong. He had dismissed me so casually the night before, cast me aside because I didn't meet his definition of success. But he had also apologized, and that apology, rare as a comet, deserved at least a response. I'll be home after 6. His reply came quickly. See you then. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I didn't tell Stephanie. I didn't tell anyone. This was something I needed to do alone. At exactly 6:15, I pulled into the long circular driveway of my parents' home. The place looked the same. Perfect hedges. A freshly washed black Mercedes in the driveway. Light glowing from every window like a stage set. I parked my car by the curb and took a deep breath. My father answered the door before I rang the bell. He was in jeans and a navy sweater, looking more like a retired professor than a CEO. "Thanks for coming," he said quietly. I nodded. He stepped aside and gestured for me to enter. The house smelled of lemon polish and fresh flowers, as it always did. The grand staircase still swept upward like a question left unanswered. "In the study," he said. I followed him into the room I used to avoid. It had always been filled with the ticking of antique clocks and the scent of cigar smoke. But now it was quieter, more subdued. Books lined the shelves. One of them, I noticed with a start, was a recent business book that had quoted me in the acknowledgments. He gestured to a leather armchair, then sat across from me. "I owe you more than an apology," he began. "I owe you a conversation I should have had years ago." I said nothing, letting him continue. "When you were little, you used to build things out of cereal boxes, bridges, machines, cities. I remember one time you made a robot with arms that actually moved when you pulled a string." I blinked. I hadn't thought about that in years. "You always saw the world differently," he said. And I didn't know how to encourage that. I was too busy trying to build my own version of success. "You didn't see me," I said softly. He nodded. "No, I saw what I wanted to see, or what I thought you should be. But last night, when you walked away, it was like looking in a mirror I didn't recognize." He stood and began pacing, hands behind his back. "You built something remarkable, Cassandra. Not just a company, a vision. You lead people, inspire them. That's something I never learned to do. I built machines. You built minds." There was silence, not awkward, just full of weight. "I'm not here for praise, Dad," I said eventually. "I know, but I need to give it anyway." He stopped and faced me. "I always thought success meant being seen, admired, feared even, but you've made me realize it means something else entirely." I watched him carefully. This wasn't easy for him. Vulnerability was not his native language. "I was wrong," he said, "about you, about what matters." I took a deep breath. "I didn't hide Synapse Core to punish you," I said. "I just wanted to know if I mattered beyond my achievements, beyond appearances." He nodded. "You do." he said. The words were clumsy. Not enough, but real. I'll need time to trust that, I said. Take all the time you need, he replied. But would you consider helping me with the transition? I know you're technically the boss now, but I'd like to learn how to do it right. Something shifted in me then, not forgiveness exactly, but the first step toward it. I'll help, I said. As long as you understand I'm not here to save you, I'm here to save the company. And maybe, just maybe, what's left of us. He nodded. And this time, he didn't try to shake my hand like a client. He simply said, "Thank you." As I left the study, I passed a photo on the side table. It was old, faded. I was maybe 7 years old, sitting in the garage with a pile of wires and cardboard. My father was beside me, laughing. We had been builders once. Maybe we still could be. The next morning, the air in Seattle was damp with a mist that clung to the windows of the Synapse Core Tower like fingerprints. Cassandra stood alone in her office, her fingers wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee she'd forgotten to drink. Below her, the city stirred, cars crawled through intersections. Pedestrians hunched in coats moved along sidewalks, and neon signs blinked against the gray morning like reluctant eyes. Everything was in motion, yet she felt suspended in place as if she were waiting for something she could not name. News of the birthday party revelation had traveled faster than she expected. By 10 o'clock, her inbox had already collected a dozen press requests. Some were subtle, others brazen. From quiet founder to family shock, Synapse Core CEO's dramatic reveal. The woman who bought her father's company. Even Forbes had reached out, hinting at a cover feature. Cassandra had spent years avoiding the spotlight, and now it had turned to her like a lighthouse beam cutting through fog. Stephanie arrived without knocking, carrying 2 tablets and her usual efficiency. "You've seen the coverage?" she asked. Cassandra nodded. "It's worse than I thought." "It's also better than you think," Stephanie said, setting the tablets down. "The board loves it. Investors think it's brilliant branding, and the staff, they're inspired." "It's not a brand," Cassandra said quietly. "It's my life." "I know," Stephanie replied, softer now, "but that's why it matters." Cassandra looked at one of the tablets. Her image stared back at her, calm, poised, dressed simply beside the opulent glitter of her family. There was a caption. She changed the room without changing her clothes. A knock at the door pulled her back. Rachel, her assistant, poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt. You have a guest. He says it's important." "Who is it?" Cassandra asked. Rachel hesitated. "Richard Thompson." Cassandra blinked. "Send him in." Richard stepped into the room, his usual calm replaced by a slight tension in his jaw. He wore a charcoal coat still damp from the rain. "Morning, Miranda," he said. "Richard, what brings you here unannounced?" He didn't sit. "We have a problem. Not here at Hayes." Cassandra straightened. "What kind of problem?" He hesitated. "Public backlash. Investors are starting to ask if you made the acquisition for emotional reasons. One of your father's old rivals is fanning the flames, claims the purchase was a vanity move." Cassandra felt her chest tighten. "That's ridiculous. The acquisition was vetted and the numbers speak for themselves." "They do," Richard agreed, "but this isn't about numbers. It's about narrative." Cassandra exhaled slowly. "Of course it is. He's talking to Business Weekly. If it goes to print the wrong way, it could jeopardize the restructuring vote." Cassandra sat in silence. Her fingers tapped lightly on the edge of her desk. She had expected resistance. What she hadn't expected was how personal it would feel. She wasn't just defending a business decision. She was defending her right to lead. "I'll handle it," she said finally. "You'll need to speak publicly," Richard said. "TV, interview, something that tells your side before they tell theirs." Cassandra closed her eyes. "Visibility has a cost," Richard nodded, "but silence has a bigger one." That afternoon, Cassandra recorded an interview with a local business network. The studio was small, the lighting harsh, but the interviewer was prepared and respectful. "You've become something of a symbol overnight," the woman said. "A self-made billionaire who hid her identity even from her own family. Why keep it secret for so long?" Cassandra looked into the camera, her voice steady. "Because I wanted to see if people would value me for who I was, not what I had. For years, I watched people I loved treat worth like it came from status or clothing or cars. I needed to know if I could still belong when I stripped all of that away." The interviewer leaned forward. "And did you?" Cassandra smiled, but there was sadness behind it. "Some did, some didn't. But what I learned is that my value doesn't come from them. It comes from what I build, what I believe in, and the people I choose to lift up along the way." The clip went viral. Within hours, it was shared by entrepreneurs, students, even celebrities. The narrative had shifted. She wasn't just the CEO who surprised her family. She was the woman who had challenged the myth of what success should look like. That night, Cassandra sat alone in her living room, curled on the couch with a blanket and her laptop. She had intended to catch up on backlog reports but found herself watching the interview replayed online. A comment caught her eye, just 4 words. "This gave me courage." She stared at it for a long time. Then she opened the reply box and typed back, "You already had it." As the screen dimmed and the room fell into shadow, Cassandra realized that something fundamental had shifted. Not just in how the world saw her, but in how she saw herself. Not hidden, not diminished, not waiting, visible and unafraid. It had been exactly 1 year since Cassandra had walked into her father's birthday party dressed in simplicity and truth. 1 year since her identity as the CEO of Synapse Corp had collided with the version of herself her family had clung to. 12 months was not a long time in business, but in the world of human relationships it could be a lifetime. The season had turned again, and the late autumn wind scattered golden leaves across the steps of her townhouse. Cassandra sat at the long wooden table in her kitchen, the surface covered in documents not of corporate takeovers or funding rounds, but sketches, names, and maps. In the center sat a vision board unpolished, taped together with handwritten notes and headlines. At the top, written in blue marker, were the words, "Access is power." Synapse Corp was growing. Their neural interface had entered its 3rd prototype phase, and clinical trials showed promising data not just for assistive technology, but for augmenting education, accessibility, and communication for marginalized communities. Cassandra had insisted that their next phase prioritize schools and hospitals in underserved areas. When investors had raised concerns about profit margins, she had answered with data and vision. "We don't just build for profit," she told them. "We build for permanence." That morning, she had received an invitation to speak at the Global Tech Forum in Zurich. The keynote slot. It was the kind of invitation people built entire careers to reach. Stephanie had dropped it on her desk with a smile that said, "I told you so." But Cassandra hesitated. In the year since her story had become public, she had become more than a tech executive. She had become a symbol of quiet power, of earned success, of resilience without show. Women wrote to her from around the world. Single mothers, first-generation graduates, founders who were underestimated for not dressing the part. "You reminded me I don't need to shrink to be accepted," one letter read. "I walked into my pitch meeting with my thrifted blazer and my full story, and I left with funding." Cassandra kept those letters in a drawer under her desk. They reminded her that visibility was a currency, and she had chosen to spend it deliberately. One evening, Cassandra invited her father to dinner at her home this time. She cooked it herself, a quiet act of rebellion against the years of caterers and crystal. Grilled salmon with her grandmother's lemon rosemary glaze, roasted root vegetables, fresh sourdough she had made from scratch during a rare Sunday off. He arrived exactly on time, wearing a soft gray sweater instead of a suit, a bottle of wine in hand. They spoke of business at first, cautiously. He updated her on the integration between Hayes Manufacturing and Synapse Corps' logistics division. The transition had taken longer than planned, but profits were steady, and the workforce had grown by 12%. Cassandra praised his leadership on the employee retention program. Her father, for the first time, didn't deflect the compliment. After dinner, he lingered over a glass of wine, watching her with the quiet intensity she remembered from childhood when he'd been a man building a company with calloused hands and sleepless nights, not one chasing status with scotch and silk. "I watched your keynote at Stanford last month," he said. "Oh?" she asked. "You spoke about invisible potential, how most of the world overlooks it." Cassandra nodded. "I meant every word." He tapped the rim of his glass. "I think I overlooked it once, too." She looked at him. "You mean in me?" He held her gaze. "In you and in myself. I spent a lot of years thinking success was what you could measure on paper net worth, square footage, applause. You taught me otherwise." She didn't speak, letting the weight of his words settle between them. "I used to be proud of the business I built," he said, "but lately I'm more proud of the woman I raised." It was not an apology, not exactly, but it didn't need to be. "Thank you," she said softly. They sat in silence for a while, the kind that speaks louder than conversation. When he left, he hugged her the way he hadn't since she was a teenager, firm, wordless, and honest. Weeks later, Cassandra stood in front of a classroom of teenage girls in Oakland, California. The school was small, the walls painted with murals of trailblazing women. She wore jeans, sneakers, and the same black blazer from the night of the party. No one recognized her at first, and that was exactly how she liked it. She talked to them about failing math once, about learning to code in a crowded library because her dorm Wi-Fi kept crashing, about eating cereal for dinner to save money for server space, about how she didn't look like the people in the brochures, but she built the company they now wanted to intern for. One girl, no older than 16, raised her hand and asked, "How did you know you were good enough?" Cassandra smiled. "I didn't," she said. "I just kept showing up anyway." She left that day with a new kind of clarity. Her legacy would not be the billion-dollar valuation. It would be access, mentorship programs, scholarships for coders who had no coding boot camps, spaces where brilliance was nurtured regardless of shoes, address, or accent. By the end of the year, she launched the Cassandra Harris Initiative, named not after herself, but after her grandmother, whose name she had legally taken back after leaving home at 18. The initiative's mission was simple: to make technology education accessible for those never invited into the room, and this time she did not hide. She spoke openly about her upbringing, her family's obsession with appearance, and how she had nearly believed their definition of success. Her father donated the seed funding for the first scholarship. Heather, now opening her sustainable fashion studio, became a guest speaker on authenticity in business. Her mother volunteered on the mentorship board, helping young girls learn how to interview with confidence and compassion. Cassandra was still the same woman who wore the same jacket 3 days in a row, who kept her office without a nameplate, and who drank terrible gas station coffee on long road trips to meet rural school boards. But now, when people saw her, they didn't just see a surprise twist at a birthday party. They saw a builder, a believer. And when the media asked her what drove her, she said only this: "The world taught me to make myself smaller to be accepted. I built a life that refused to listen." Then she smiled, because she had finally become what she'd always needed: unapologetically visible and absolutely enough.